What is up, everybody? Shwazy here, and it's time to cue See You Again by Wiz Khalifa, because this is likely going to be the very last time you're going to see the Ford Bronco on the channel. All right, folks, so believe it or not, today, which is July 19th, 2024, I am meeting up with an individual and very likely going to be selling this vehicle. This is the last day I'm going to be driving it, experiencing it, and it's a very bittersweet moment because I really do love this car. And in today's video, I'm going to talk 4 reasons why I am deciding to sell my Ford Bronco, and also kind of give you a little bit of a 3-year 30 or so thousand mile update. Later on in the video, I'll tell you some of the things I've really loved the most about the Bronco. And then lastly, I will give you a hint about what's to come in the future. So let's start things off with why I'm deciding to sell my Ford Bronco. Okay, so the first reason is probably the biggest reason why I decided to sell this vehicle. That has to do with the fact that I am a car addict. I am in love with cars. It's a horrible passion, obsession, addiction, whatever you want to call it. And I feel for all of you out there that share the same addiction as I do, where you just want to try different vehicles, you want to enjoy them, and then you want to try something different very shortly afterwards. Honestly, if it was financially feasible and emotionally feasible, which I'll talk about later on in the video, I would probably switch cars more often. Now, I took delivery of this vehicle. It was a very special moment back in July of 2021. It's almost 3 years to the date. I believe it was July 21st. And I've owned this car for 3 years and nearly 30,000 miles. And I've thoroughly enjoyed my time here. And I'll talk about the things I've loved later on in the video. But that being said, I feel like I have experienced a lot of things that this vehicle has to offer. I've taken it off-roading, I've taken the top off, taken the doors off, and I'm at the point where I'm wanting to try something different. Now, that does not mean I do not like this car. In fact, most of the times I've sold my vehicles, it's never been because I've stopped liking them. It's because I've been wanting to try something different. Now, I am fortunate, being an online automotive creator, I have been able to receive press vehicles, and I'm very thankful for that opportunity. Now, when I get press vehicles, I typically get them for about a week, and it allows me to, scratch that itch a little bit of trying something different. I drive it around a lot. Pretty much it becomes my primary car for a week, just so I can really get to know it. But 1 week really isn't the same as having a different vehicle. For one, it's not mine. I can't always test it the same way I would do with my vehicle. And also, it doesn't really give me a long-term idea of how the vehicle behaves. And I find it very helpful, or I hope at least you find it very helpful, when I provide my longer-term updates on these vehicles. After I've owned them for 1, 2, maybe even 3 years, I give you my real-life experience with these vehicles and share those experiences with you, so that if you are in the market for one of these vehicles, you'll be better informed. And that brings me to the second reason why I'm selling this vehicle, and that is because I am an online automotive content creator. And I don't know if you ever have experience with creating content online, but you generally want to be creating new types of content, or the latest vehicles, if you're in the automotive space. And the Bronco is still a very highly desired vehicle. There's still tons of new things that can be done to it, but generally speaking, you're going to want to cycle through cars more often than the average person. And so by getting a different vehicle, it will allow me to create new, different types of content and possibly reach a broader audience, helping grow my business and my channel. So that is definitely a big factor into getting a different vehicle. Now, I have contemplated selling the car that I've owned longer than this, which is my Dodge Challenger Hellcat. But because of the fact that Dodge decided to stop producing the Hellcats, that body style is no longer going to be around. They're prioritizing EVs and 6-cylinder engines. It's probably in my best interest to hold on to the Challenger for a little bit longer to kind of see how the dust settles and figure out if I really want to keep that car for longer or try something different. This, on the other hand, they're going to continue producing. They're producing them in record numbers. You can get 2024 model year with all the bells and whistles. There's no end of production in sight for the Bronco because it is such a desirable vehicle. So if it so happens that I regret my decision after selling this car, Although I won't be able to get this exact same vehicle, which I custom ordered and reserved a year prior to taking delivery, so that's July of 2020. It's really been a long process. I will still be able to take advantage of everything the Bronco has to offer, whereas the Hellcat is not something I can necessarily do unless I find one on the used car market. And at that point, it's very questionable on how the previous owner has treated it, and there's a lot of uncertainty there because they're not making them anymore, whereas this one they are. So that's the second reason why I decided to sell this vehicle instead of selling my Challenger. And that brings me to the third reason why I decided to sell the Ford Bronco. And that has to do with the fact that this vehicle is my daily driver. I drive it to work, I drive it to run errands. The Challenger is really left as a weekend fun car if the weather's good, and if I'm in the mood to drive a two-door sports coupe muscle car. This is really the one I grab the keys and go. And because of that, and I've made videos about this just recently, I need something that's probably a little bit of a better daily driver. Now, that's not to say this is not a good daily driver. In fact, in that video that I just recently made, I point out how I believe in 5 of the 8 or so categories, this thing actually qualifies as a good daily driver. However, in the categories that it doesn't, there are some pretty big negatives. Now, I will mention that the things that prevent this from being a perfect daily driver are par for the course. These are all things that come with the territory when you're purchasing an off-road vehicle, whether it's this or a Jeep Wrangler. I mean, I guess there is the new Land Cruiser, but it's not necessarily the same as this one. The doors don't come off, the top doesn't come off. So, when you're purchasing this or a Wrangler, you're going to be facing the issues that I'm going to be touching on in just a moment. The first issue really has to do with the ride quality. Now, my particular vehicle, if you guys haven't followed along with the channel, came with the 32-inch Big Bend wheels, and they were the all-terrain tires. And a couple years ago, I decided to upgrade to these 35-inch Wrangler Territory MT tires. These are straight off of a Sasquatch package Bronco, and I also upgraded the Sasquatch suspension. So I've got Bilstein shocks here as well. And, I didn't really notice a huge change in ride quality, but I will say daily driving this vehicle to and from work, driving it on the freeway, it is quite a bumpy ride, especially when you're going over imperfections in the road. You definitely feel that inside of the cabin, and it kind of starts to wear on you when you're driving about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes every single day. It kind of just wears you down a little bit. Now, I will say this suspension is very capable off-road. I've taken this into various trails, and I love the fact that you have the additional ground clearance and the Bilstein suspension, but when you're daily driving it, it really isn't that great of an experience. The second thing that also comes with the territory of an off-roader is the fact that it's quite loud on the inside. So my particular vehicle came with the soft top, and I've explained in other videos why that is and why I didn't choose the hard top, but I will say it gets very loud inside of the cabin. If you're planning on having a Bluetooth phone conversation when you're driving down the freeway at 70 miles per hour, it's going to be very difficult to do. You're going to have to pump the volume up, you're going to have to speak very loud, and it might be difficult for the other person to actually hear what you're saying. And I don't necessarily have a phone call conversation every single time I get on the freeway, but there have been some instances where I was having a work phone call and I actually had to pull over into a parking lot, get off the freeway, and have that conversation because the loudness of the interior was going to interfere with my conversation. The other thing is when you're driving, an hour to an hour, 15 minutes every single day, and you hear that constant loud noise when you're going 70, 80 on the freeway, that also kind of messes with your mental state. I get home a little bit more anxious, a little bit more frustrated at traffic because it's almost like you're driving in a drop-top convertible. You're just experiencing everything, and that's awesome when it's great weather and it's a perfect day, but when you're just getting home from a long days at work, it can be a little bit frustrating. And so that kind of goes against the daily drivability of this vehicle, which is something I want improved in the next vehicle I get. And alongside the loudness on the inside, I have noticed that there are generally more rattles located inside of the vehicle when you're driving over bumps. This stuff does kind of move around a little bit. I have noticed a little bit of a rattle coming from the rear trunk area where, some of these metal components will start rattling when I'm going over speed bumps. And, that carries throughout the interior of the cabin, making it, again, a little bit more louder than you would expect from, just your typical crossover vehicle. So all of those things combined make this not the perfect daily driver when you've been driving it for 3 years, 30,000 miles. Now, I can already hear the comment section going, what did you expect when you bought an off-roader? Of course it's going to be louder. Of course it's going to be a little bit rougher. And honestly, those are things I expected. I knew that it was going to be louder because the soft top and the suspension was going to ride more like a pickup truck. However, I was willing to take that sacrifice for the fact of having an off-roader where I could take it on some crazy trails. I could take the doors off, take the roof off. And what I have found is I use this vehicle more as a daily driver than I use as an off-roader. This isn't a toy car for me or like a third car where I just take it on off-road trails on the weekend. The majority of the time, as most people who own this car, this is going to be a mall crawler, and that's totally fine. I don't judge people who do that because that's generally what cars are. If anybody tells you they're taking a vehicle off-roading every single weekend, they're probably lying to you. And so for me, even though I loved having that open roof, I loved the fact that I could take the doors off, because of the weather here in Utah, where it's either scorching hot or extremely cold, I found that I was only opening the roof in the late spring and early fall time period, and I wasn't really utilizing it as much as I could if I lived in a climate like, let's say, California. Also, in terms of taking the doors off and the entire roof off, that was quite a feat. For one, the doors are a little bit heavy, but also you have to find a place to store them. And then I'm a paranoid person, so I'm constantly worried that somebody is going to steal something in my vehicle, despite the fact that I can lock all the storage compartments. That was always something that I worried about, because there are some places where you can park here that aren't very safe, and I didn't want to think about what places I was going to be driving my vehicle to determine, if I should put the doors back on, because it does take quite a bit of time. So the doors came off probably a handful of times the entire time I owned this vehicle. And in terms of the entire roof coming off, I did that once, where I actually removed the entire soft top off the vehicle, and that actually was a two-person job. It's a pretty heavy piece of tarp when it comes to that soft top roof. And when removing it, you have to be very careful not to scratch these pillars over here, because the metal frame of the soft top is very close to the metal frame of the vehicle, which is painted. And so when you're taking off this soft top, it can be very easy to scratch these. And like I said, it is a very heavy piece, so it is a two-person job. And I found that after I put this soft top on the ground for about a week, when I reinstalled it, the fit was a little bit different in the front of the vehicle. It took about probably a month or so for it to fit back normally. Now, I will say I never had any type of leaks, but I could tell that it was catching on something as it was closing and when I was latching it on the inside of the vehicle. So it's just not used as much as I expected it to. The most common position that I would use the soft top would be in this orientation, because it was the easiest. The doors coming off, these panels coming off, the entire roof sliding back and coming off were all awesome, but I only use those a handful of times because of the convenience factor. The other thing I'll mention is when your doors and when your roof is always off, not only can it probably get broken into a lot easier and stuff getting stolen, but secondly, it does get really dusty on the inside, and I'm kind of a stickler for having a dirty car. I want it to be clean, and getting into the vehicle and seeing a bunch of dust because the roof and the doors are off and everything's out in the open kind of, grind my gears a little bit. And so those are the main reasons why I really didn't utilize all of the capabilities of this vehicle and kept it at most in this position in the late spring and early fall. Now, again, all of that would be worth the effort, and it would be an extremely fun experience if this was strictly taken for weekend drives and off-road adventures, but this is my daily driver, and for that reason I need something that's a little bit more comfortable. And that also leads me to the fourth reason why I'm selling the Bronco. Now for that, we're going to jump into the second row, and I want to point out one thing, and that is the fact that there are no rear air vents. Now I can see people rolling their eyes through the screen. No, the lack of rear air vents is not the reason I'm selling this vehicle. I'm trying to prove a point, and that is the fact that I have some changing needs since when I initially purchased this vehicle. Now also, one caveat, there are some air vents in the back. They're located inside of the footwell. So you do have rear air vents. They're just not ones that will blow on your face like you find in a lot of other vehicles, including the Jeep Wrangler. But I have had some changing needs since I initially purchased this car in 2021. I've had some change in family dynamics, and for that reason, I need something that's a little bit more practical. One of those things is the fact that I generally carry more people now in the back, and I need rear air vents for good circulation, especially on days like today where it's about 100 degrees. Now, granted, the air conditioning on this vehicle is one of the best I've ever experienced. It blows cold no matter what temperature is outside. However, because this thing has the soft top roof and not really great access access into the second row and also a cavernous trunk area, all of that airflow doesn't get to the second row as well as I would have wanted. I've had people sit back there, I'm on max AC, and they're saying, you know, it's a little bit warm. And it would be nice to have some rear air vents to cool the passengers down by having air blow on their face. That's something that I don't get why Ford didn't do. The other thing I would like is a little bit more storage capacity. As you can see here, if I place a stroller in the back of the vehicle, it takes up the majority of the trunk. So if I'm needing to carry anything else, it either goes inside of the second row, which gets kind of tight when you have 4 passengers, or it just has to be left at home. So it would be nice to have a little bit more storage capacity so I could throw more things inside of the vehicle when I'm going on a road trip or going on a trip to see somebody and I need more capacity. And the last thing when it comes to changing needs is I want a little bit of a safer vehicle. Now, this vehicle is generally pretty safe. IIHS rates it as good. I think the only reason it didn't get a top safety pick is because of the head restraints and the headlights. They felt like they didn't show the corners well enough, which I think is a little bit of an extreme. I think generally this vehicle is a safe vehicle. It's got side curtain airbags, of course your typical airbags up front, and I think in a car accident, because of the height of this vehicle, it would do a little bit better than your typical compact sedan. However, I would like something even safer. The vehicle I'm actually looking to get is a top safety pick plus, which means it's one of the safest vehicles you can buy. And you know, that is not the only reason, but it is kind of a nice add-on feature of the new vehicle I'm looking to purchase, which partially influences my decision on selling this vehicle. All right, now that we've discussed the 4 reasons why I decided to sell this vehicle, let's talk about the handful of things that I've truly enjoyed in this vehicle. In all honesty, this is probably one of my favorite cars that I've ever owned. It has so much personality, has so many cool features, and at the same time, because of those strengths, it also has some pretty big weaknesses, like the fact that it's loud on the inside and not super comfortable when you're just daily driving it. Because this vehicle isn't a jack of all trades, that's why I love it so much. There are things I love and things I hate, and that's why I'm going to miss this vehicle. And the first feature that I think I'm going to miss the most, and one of the reasons why I actually thought about holding back on selling this vehicle, has to do with this roof. I can't explain to you how much I love this soft top roof with this giant opening. I'm not even talking about opening up the rest of the roof because, like I said, that's a little bit more complicated. But this, just to open up those flaps on the passenger and driver side and open this up at a stoplight when the weather is like 65 degrees outside and there's no sun, that is a wonderful experience. And the fact that you don't have a crossbar over here above the passenger and driver seat like you find in a Wrangler makes this probably unlike any other off-road vehicle. Neither the Hummer EV nor the Wrangler have this type of experience sitting inside of the cabin. In fact, a few months ago, me and my wife went on a little trip and we did a little bit of stargazing by simply taking these seats all the way down, laying back inside of the vehicle on the driver and passenger side, grabbing some popcorn, and stargazing through our open roof. It was a little bit chilly outside, but because the car was a little bit insulated and I could also turn on the heated seats, it was perfect temperature on the inside. And that's a memory I'm never gonna be able to forget, and not anything I could replicate in really any other vehicle because this has this open air feeling. I think Ford knocked it out of the park with this feature, and this is gonna be the hardest one for me to say goodbye to. Now, the next thing I've loved about this vehicle is its aesthetics. This is something that I loved from the very first day I saw it on the presentation day where they unveiled this vehicle. I love how this is a perfect mix of retro and modern. I mean, you can clearly tell this is a Bronco from the front end, from the way the headlights kind of wrap into the Bronco logo. You still have these little edges over here that rise up and give you kind of a clear sight from the windshield. You have a nice flat hood. Very, very good looking vehicle from the front end. I think from the side it looks a little bit more conventional, kind of just a boxy SUV, but then coming back to the rear end, I love the LED tail lights. Mine particularly has the upgraded LED package, so it's got the upgraded LED headlights and tail lights. I mean, the Bronco horse, the branding on this vehicle is almost unlike any other. I mean, aside from like a Mustang, this really has some of the best brand loyalty or brand presence of any vehicle I've owned. Now, the Challenger is probably on par with it, but still, you know, I love the fact that the interior is also very boxy, carries over the same styling as the exterior. You have this flat area with Bronco script embossed over on the passenger side. I also love the fact that I got the sandstone interior, which they don't make anymore, but it's kind of this light beige brown with some black. It just looks really cool, really pretty looking, and I love the seating position. So getting inside of the vehicle, one of my favorite features, which, speaking of which, opening and closing this door, such a satisfying sound, and The lock, unlock. I love the sound of that. It just sounds so utilitarian, so military-like. But getting back to my other point, the seating position here, I love how you feel sitting inside of this thing. It's almost like you're on top of the road. You got this clear view of everything going on around you. You have this high door seal, but the windows are so tall. It just makes it feel like you're driving in a tank. It's very similar to if you've ever driven a Hummer or a Jeep Wrangler. In fact, I think this feels a little bit more substantial than a Jeep Wrangler. I've reviewed quite a few and they feel a little bit smaller, but still very similar type of experience. And unlike majority of cars out there, if you sit in your typical crossover, this feels like you're sitting in a tall sedan, whereas here you feel like you're sitting in an SUV. You feel like you're sitting in something that's important, substantial, cool. That feeling is very hard to replicate in a lot of vehicles. And that is another one of the, I guess, aesthetic or structural features of this vehicle that I absolutely love. They really just thought it through from beginning to end. There's nothing here that feels like a repurposed Ford Escape knob or button or anything. Everything is well thought out and matches inside and out. I mean, Ford really knocked it out of the park with the styling. Now, I talked about how the air conditioning here blows really cold, and the other part of that is the heater and the heated seats. The heated seats on this vehicle are the strongest I've experienced in any other vehicle I've ever sat in. And for those of you that have seen, I've reviewed quite a few vehicles and none of them have the strength of the heated seats as this car. So if you live in a cold climate, the heated seats here will be such a welcome feature for the Bronco. I mean, they really burn your butt, but I love it because on a cold day where it's snowing a lot, those heated seats can be used in replacement of the heater, and you can even open up the soft top and still have the heated seats on and remain warm on a colder day. Truly a phenomenal job. I'm not sure if this is a common feature among Fords. Maybe some other Ford products also have the same heating elements that this one has, and I'm sure all Ford products have good heated seats, but I will argue with anybody that says these heated seats are not powerful enough because there's really nothing else quite like it. So AC and heater blows cold, and the heated seats work fantastic. Now, the next feature that I really love about this vehicle is the Ford Pass app. And this is becoming common amongst a lot of manufacturers, but the nice thing here is Ford includes it for free. You don't have to pay any type of subscription fee or anything like that, and this app has a lot of good info that they've updated over time. So not only can I, lock and unlock the vehicle, turn it on with my phone, I can look at the location, I can schedule remote start, I can also schedule service from here, but I love how it makes it so easily accessible. It also allows you to nickname the vehicle, you can see how much gas you have left, but it's such a helpful feature that I've utilized multiple times when, this car is parked in an underground parking garage and it's cold outside. So I, pre-schedule a remote start as I'm walking up to the vehicle. That way the climate is perfect when I get inside, and I'm not able to do that with just my typical remote start on the key because the vehicle is parked a little too far away. So really nice that Ford includes that with every purchase of the Bronco, and even better that you never have to pay for it. Now, the next feature I've really loved about my Bronco is the powertrain. So mine comes with a base 2.3 liter EcoBoost turbocharged 4-cylinder, produces just around 300 horsepower on regular grade fuel. And I gotta say, even though this is a generally heavier vehicle, this powertrain is fantastic for its size, even considering the fact that I upgraded to larger, heavier tires and I lifted the suspension. I've never felt like this engine is underpowered. In fact, I made videos about this in the past. I'm gonna link them up on the screen right now, where I compare the 2.3 liter to the 2.7 liter. I drove a 2.7 at the Bronco Off-Rodeo, fantastic powertrain as well, but I really don't think you need it. I think this engine is more than powerful enough, even on hot days where it's over 100 degrees. It rarely feels like you have a turbo lag, maybe just a little bit, but this thing moves quick. It rips on the freeway. If you're just gunning it, it will accelerate from 60 to 80 miles per hour and pass somebody in the blink of an eye. It's very, very quick. Now, mine also comes with a 10-speed automatic transmission. I can't speak to the 7-speed manual. I don't have experience with that. But this pair up with the 2.3 liter and the 10-speed auto is fantastic. I have no hesitations recommending this to anybody. It does not feel underpowered for a vehicle with essentially the Sasquatch package. I also just love how it looks. Not only does this grille go up pretty much to my lower chest, but I like how it's all exposed. I mean, just makes it feel like a rugged off-road vehicle. There's no plastic covers here. It's definitely dusty, so my apologies for that. I've never really cleaned the engine bay. I didn't want to take a power washer to it, but I like how this looks. I like the messiness. I think it just makes this thing feel more rugged rather than just kind of a fancy looking, Range Rover where you're really never taking this thing off-roading. So this makes me feel good about the capabilities of this vehicle, as silly as that sounds. Now, there are dozens of other things that I really love about this vehicle, but the last one I really want to point out is the size of this Bronco. Now, I was rewatching my delivery video from 3 years ago, and getting into the car, I noted how large it felt on the inside. And I gotta say, that quickly faded over time. It really doesn't feel that large when you're driving inside the vehicle. Even though you have quite a bit of height above you, it's not a hard vehicle to navigate because this is the size of your typical, crossover. It's not a massive vehicle. That being said, I love the size of this over the Wrangler. Like I noted earlier, I've reviewed quite a few different Wranglers, and to me, they all feel a little bit small on the inside, a little bit cramped. They also look smaller on the outside. This thing parked next to a Wrangler, even without the Sasquatch package, looks taller, looks wider, more substantial. The Wrangler kind of looks a little puny compared to this, and I know I'm going to get hate in the comments for it, and I'm a big Wrangler fan. I've honestly recommended the Wrangler 392 over the Bronco Raptor, but I got to be honest with my opinions when I see a Bronco parked next to a Wrangler. Also, in terms of interior space, this thing feels bigger. Now, legroom is questionable in the second row. I'll show you what that looks like, but sitting inside of the first row, I can tell you that in a Wrangler, it's very easy to reach over and grab the passenger side. Like it's almost just an arm reach away. Whereas here, I kind of have to lean over and grab it. And I feel like there's a little bit more cabin space when I have a passenger sitting here. It doesn't feel as cramped. Also, the dashboard doesn't feel as close as in a Wrangler. The Wrangler's is like right here, right in front of you, whereas this feels a little bit more spaced out. I mean, it's still a boxy shape, but it feels a little bit more spacious on the inside. And because you don't have that crossbar above you, you also feel a little bit more airier when you open up the roof. Now, in regards to legroom, let me show you what that looks like in the second row. First off, jumping into the second row, it's a little bit easier to do than in a Wrangler because this space is a little bit wider. The Wrangler has a smaller entry, and then this part of the door locking mechanism, or this door closing mechanism, actually sticks out in a Wrangler. So it's not recessed like it is here in the Bronco. In the Wrangler, if you're reaching in and out of the seat, you could easily hit this mechanism with your elbow, and it's very painful. I've done it a handful of times, whereas here, I've never hit it because in like a typical crossover fashion, it's recessed into the door. It makes much more sense. But anyway, climbing in here, you can see this is me sitting behind myself, and I've got quite a bit of legroom over here. And also my seat position is pretty high, but I don't have a huge angle to my knees. It's not like my knees are close to my chest. I have plenty of thigh support here. The seat is pretty long, I would say. So even a taller person could sit back here comfortably, and I really love this look. Now, I didn't sit in the second row very often, but now sitting in it, it's a very nice place to sit if you're a passenger. Now, also, I do like how back here you have USB ports and a power outlet. I've actually used this for an air compressor more often than I thought I would. So really nice welcome features back here. Now, I have also had 3 people sit across back here. There's 3 seat belts, and generally it's a little bit of a tighter spot, but it's a little bit more comfortable, I would say, than your typical compact crossover like a Toyota RAV4. Also, even though I complained about the storage capacity here, at least for my needs, this is definitely larger than a Wrangler. The width of this trunk area is larger, and the depth is larger as well. In the Wrangler, everything kind of feels a little bit shrunken down, which also helps with its off-roading capability. It's nice to have a narrower vehicle, a little bit smaller, but when it comes to daily use, the Bronco is better suited for that because the trunk area is a little bit larger. Now, the last thing I want to discuss is my 3-year, 30,000 mile update, and provide some details if I've had any reliability issues. And the answer to that is no. Since the last video I made at the 20,000 mile mark, I really have had no issues with this vehicle. The only thing being, in typical fashion, the frameless windows. A couple weeks ago, about a month ago I should say, I had this rear driver window kind of glitch on me, where when I opened this window, it wouldn't actually slide down as it does right now on video. It would stay in its closed position, which meant it kept getting stuck on this weather stripping over here. And when I would close the door, it would stay stuck over here, and I was worried it could shatter the window. So I ended up having to take it to my Ford dealership, and they honestly just did a reset using the window switches. My understanding is if you hold the window switch down for 5 seconds after it goes to its lowest position, then hold it up for 5 seconds, it kind of reboots the system. It's really just a software glitch, but that's something I've had continuously in my ownership of this vehicle. But in terms of everything else, powertrain, the screens, the technology, none of that has had any issues. I will say though, the Android Auto continues to glitch every so often. Maybe once every couple days I have to hit the reset button by hitting the power button, and the next Seek track button, holding that down, resets the system. But those are the only 2 issues. Everything else has been solidly reliable on this Bronco. I've had no complaints whatsoever. So if that's your hesitation, it shouldn't be, because this is a week 2 production build. This is one of the very first Broncos out of the factory, and I've had 0 issues when it comes to the powertrain and the expensive parts inside of the car. All right, folks, let's go for one last ride in the Bronco. Now, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, it's a bittersweet day for me. Obviously, the sale of this car is my decision. Nobody's forcing me to do this. I don't have to do this. The car's perfectly reliable, but you know, due to the reasons I mentioned earlier, this seems like a good time to do it. But even still, I always have a hard time selling my vehicles. It's never been easy, no matter which car I've sold. I will be completely open with you. I get emotionally attached to my cars, especially when I've had some incredible memories in them. And this vehicle is a perfect example of that. I've had just truly tremendous memories and experiences inside of this car, from various road trips I've taken to the Bronco off-rodeo to life events that have happened while I've owned this vehicle. And because of that, it makes it very much difficult to make the decision I'm making. Now, I say it's a bittersweet moment because I'm really sad about selling this vehicle, but I'm also super excited for the next vehicle coming to the channel. It's going to be completely different than this vehicle that I'm sitting in today. That being said, it also is very off-road capable. I won't be able to take the doors or the roof off. It actually has more power than this vehicle, but it's not as rugged. It's a little bit more on the luxury end, but it's also a little bit of a different powertrain setup. So to give you a bad hint, it is a vehicle I've reviewed on the channel. Now, I've reviewed quite a few dozens of vehicles, so that's not a great hint, but it's a car I reviewed in 2022, so maybe you can narrow it down a little bit. It may not be a car at all. It may not be an SUV. It may not be a truck. Who knows? You guys will see in the next upload. Actually, at the time of filming this video, I don't even have it in my possession. I'm planning on taking delivery of it next week, but you know, since it's not in my possession, there is a very, very small chance that that car won't actually come to fruition. I hope that doesn't happen, but you know, this entire segment may go to waste because I may end up getting something different entirely because that deal doesn't work out. But I'm hoping it does, and I'm hoping to bring that to you in the next video. But I will say, one thing that makes me feel a little bit better about selling this vehicle is knowing the person I'm selling it to is very excited and very appreciative of this vehicle. The individual, I found them locally in a classifieds listing, but she has wanted the Bronco ever since they came out in 2021. She's been a huge Ford loyalist. She's owned quite a few Ford Escapes, and you know, when it came time to upgrade her vehicle, she thought it has to be a Bronco. I've wanted one for so long. And so that makes me feel better about the fact that I'm selling this vehicle to a person who's really appreciative of what this car is. It's an awesome vehicle, and I think she's gonna treat it really well. Just based on the questions she asked me about, you know, how often did I take this thing off-roading? Oh, I see a little bit of rust here. And, oh, you know, how do you take the soft top off? The fact that she knows about the Sasquatch suspension, I mean, all of those things are indicative of a person who treats their cars well and is very excited. And so that makes me feel good. Maybe in the future, I will come across this vehicle again. Who knows? I'm gonna keep the VIN number. I'll probably track it somehow through the Carfax and whatnot and see where it ends up being. But this is a car I would own again any day of the week. It's an awesome vehicle, especially on a day like today where it's a little bit of overcast, so I can open up the soft top roof and just enjoy nature around me. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Maybe you're happy, maybe you're sad about it, and I just encourage you to stay tuned for future videos because there is some exciting stuff happening. It just may not be surrounding the Bronco. But if you did enjoy it, hit that like button, and also subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly car videos, everything from Broncos to Hellcats to all of the various vehicles that I review on the channel. Also check me out on all the social media at Schwazy_. And until the next video, everybody, where I'm going to reveal my next vehicle, I hope you all stay Schwazy, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. I'm going to do one last ride in this vehicle before I go to the bank and I sell it to the next owner.